He didn't have a gun in his hand. He didn't have an army behind him. He sat alone in front of a television camera in a Senate hearing room in Washington, D.C., and with just his words, he destroyed the most powerful criminal organization in American history from the inside out. Joe Valachi didn't kill the mob with a bullet. He killed it with the truth. For decades, the American government knew something dangerous was operating in the shadows. Organized crime was everywhere, in the docks, the gambling dens, the labor unions, the city streets. But whenever federal agents tried to prosecute it, they hit a wall. Nobody talked. Nobody confirmed anything. And most shockingly of all, the FBI's own director, J. Edgar Hoover, publicly denied that a national crime syndicate even existed. He called it a myth. Then came Joe Valachi, and he proved that the myth was very, very real. Joseph Michael Valachi was born in 1904 in East Harlem, New York, into a world where crime wasn't a choice, it was the neighborhood. He grew up surrounded by poverty, street gangs, and the constant presence of Italian-American underworld figures who seemed untouchable by the law. By his teenage years, Valachi was already running with burglars and thieves. By his 20s, he was working for one of the most feared crime bosses in New York history, Salvatore Maranzano. But the world Valachi entered wasn't just local street crime. It was an empire with rules, rituals, and a structure so secret that even law enforcement didn't fully understand it. In 1930, New York's underworld was torn apart by what became known as the Castellamarese War, a brutal power struggle between two rival Italian-American factions. Bodies were dropping across the city. Valachi was right in the middle of it, carrying out jobs for his bosses, surviving when many around him didn't. When the war ended, a new order was established. The American Mafia restructured itself into what it called Cosa Nostra, which in Italian means our thing. 5 powerful families divided New York between them. Valachi was formally inducted into the Genovese crime family, one of the most powerful of the 5. The initiation ceremony was unlike anything the outside world had ever heard of. Valachi sat in a room full of serious men. His finger was pricked. His blood was dripped onto a holy card. The card was set on fire, and as it burned in his hands, he swore an oath, loyalty to Cosa Nostra above everything, above his country, above his family, above his own life. The penalty for breaking that oath was death. For nearly 3 decades, Valachi kept that oath. He ran numbers rackets. He dealt heroin. He collected debts. He was never a boss, never a capo at the highest level. He was what the mob called a soldier, a foot soldier in a vast criminal army. He was arrested multiple times, convicted multiple times, and each time he went to prison, he kept his mouth shut. That was the code, omertà, the law of silence. But then something changed. In 1959, Valachi was convicted on drug trafficking charges and sent to the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary. His boss, the legendary and ruthless Vito Genovese, was also imprisoned there, convicted in a narcotics case that Genovese believed Valachi had helped engineer as an informant, which was not true. But Genovese believed it, and in the mob, suspicion alone is enough to sign a man's death warrant. Word reached Valachi through prison channels that Genovese had given him the kiss of death, the signal that he was marked for murder. Paranoid, terrified, and convinced he was living on borrowed time, Valachi made a fatal mistake. He spotted a man in the prison yard he believed was a mob hitman sent to kill him. He attacked first and beat the man to death with a metal pipe. The man was not a hitman. He was an innocent fellow inmate. Valachi was now facing a murder charge that could put him on death row. He had one option left. He went to the FBI and offered them everything he knew. What followed was one of the most remarkable moments in American law enforcement history. Valachi began talking, and he didn't stop. He confirmed what the government had always suspected but could never prove, that Cosa Nostra was real, that it was national, that it was structured like a corporation with bosses, underbosses, capos, soldiers, and associates. He named names. He described operations. He explained rituals. He drew organizational charts. In October 1963, Valachi testified before the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Investigations, and his testimony was broadcast on live national television. Millions of Americans watched in stunned silence as this small, balding, 59-year-old man casually dismantled the greatest secret in American crime history. He was the first member of Cosa Nostra to ever publicly confirm the organization's existence. The Mafia, the word itself, entered the American public consciousness in a way it never had before. Before Valachi, it was rumor. After Valachi, it was documented fact. The mob tried everything to silence him. Even a $100,000 contract was reportedly placed on his head while he was in government custody. They never got to him. Valachi spent the rest of his life in protective custody, writing his memoirs, and being interviewed by law enforcement. He died of a heart attack in 1971 in a federal prison in Texas at the age of 66. He never went home. He never saw his wife again as a free man. Joe Valachi wasn't a hero. He was a criminal who spent 30 years serving the very machine he eventually burned down. But what he did in that Senate hearing room in 1963 changed American law enforcement forever. The government used his testimony to build the legal tools that would eventually take down mob bosses across the country. One soldier, one decision, one room. And the most powerful secret society in America was never quite the same again.